Today I'm going to replace the front struts and the rear shocks on this 2014 Mustang with the 3.7 V6. The installation process should be the same for 2005 to 2014, as they're the same generation for both V6 and V8 Mustangs. With each lug nut loosened one full turn, I'll go ahead and get the side that we're working on in the air and on a jack stand. Once it's securely supported, go ahead and finish removing the lug nuts and remove your wheel. Remove the upper nut to your sway bar link here, and to do that, this will actually spin on you. You can see that it's got sections to put a wrench on it, so if this entire unit spins on you while you're trying to get this nut off, which it most likely will, you have to come up in here with something to hold that still while you spin this nut off. Then push it through and out of the way. Now once everything's bolted and ready to come out, this whole spindle is going to tip forward on you, so you're going to want to disconnect your brake line and your ABS cable, anything that's hooked up to this that you don't want getting pinched. So you can see here it's the simple push through design, and on the brake line you can just unbolt it here. Remove all the 13mm nuts up top, and you can see that is loose now. And then all that's left are these two large nuts and bolts that hold the strut onto the spindle. With the nuts removed, simply tap the bolts out and the strut's ready to fall out. If these happen to be very tight for you, make sure you temporarily seat the nut back on flush with the end of the bolt there. That way when hitting with the hammer, you don't mushroom the top of this bolt and make it impossible for you to get the nut back on later. As you can see, it just falls forward as such. We are pulling on our brake line here, hose a little bit. So that's something you want to take into consideration. Don't let it just slam forward. You may even want to prop this up somehow or have somebody hold it for you so you're not putting tension on this brake hose here. But other than that, I'm going to need both hands to wiggle this out of here, but this is ready to come out. Another option is you can tie this up slightly, utilizing this hole here, and tie it against your sway bar there. That way it's not pulling on that brake hose, which is actually what I'm going to do here in a second. So there's the old strut. You may have noticed it looks a little different than my new ones here, and that's because I didn't get the loaded one where it has the spring and everything already on it and ready to go. I'm going to be reusing the old spring here. Reasons for doing this: sometimes it's a little more affordable to get just the strut and swap the remainder over, and oftentimes depending on the vehicle, you may not be able to find a complete system like that, or find it complete with the specific strut that you actually want to run. So if yours is the entire assembly, you can go ahead and just put the new one in, but I'm going to have to break this down to transfer over, and I'm going to show how to do that right now. Alright, so here's the basic idea, and these are about the cheapest one of these spring compressors you can get. Really not liking these, but it's all I have at my disposal at the moment. You can see there, that one's kind of not really, but at least there's two fingers, so it's fully set in this one. I think they just have double fingers as a safety precaution. I think once we start to take this off and it starts to get under more pressure, it'll probably lock in there a little more. But basic idea, line these up as straight as possible with the strut. If you don't compress these enough, you run the risk when you take the top end off there that the spring can still be under pressure, the top part there, and cause that to shoot off on you. You don't want to over compress it. Probably 1.5 to 2 inches is fine. You need to get it compressed enough to get that off and be able to rethread your nut. And if you don't do it enough, like I said, it can shoot apart on you. If you don't know how to use one of these, I would recommend watching a video on how to properly use them. But I don't want to go over that in this video, or it end up being too long. Also worth noting here, definitely use this off to the side like I'm situated here in this clip. Don't sit at the top or bottom of the strut, so that if anything does go wrong, it doesn't shoot anything out at you. If you're off to the side of it, you're going to be a lot safer there. So anyways, transfer that part to the new one, as well as the boot, and now I have this wonderful mess to deal with. So that's another advantage of buying a complete assembled one with a new spring and all that, is you want to deal with this. So there's nothing actually wrong with the bearings here. It just kind of fell apart on me when I took it apart. So now I have to clean all this up, clean all these bearings up, re-grease and repack it to get this thing back together. But as you can see, this is situated as it goes, so this butts up and stops here, the top of the spring. Same scenario on the bottom. The strut will turn until there's a plate right here for the very bottom end of the spring to face up against flush on the bottom here. I tried to put my old nut back on. The new one apparently is a different thread, so don't do that. Your torque spec for this nut on 2005 to 2010 is 46 foot-pounds. On 2011 to 2014, it is 76 foot-pounds. Now this whole thing's spinning on me and I can't achieve my 76 foot-pounds of torque. So I'm going to get it installed and bolted down on the car first and then see with it under pressure if I can get that torque spec from up top. Alright, so I got it slid up in there. I managed to, from underneath, line up the holes, push them up through, hold it up with one hand while I wretched up top, and got a couple of these bolts started that way to hold it in place for me so I can start getting all this lined up. And remember, this will turn, so if this is way off, which mine was and I already turned it, you can simply just grab the body of the strut and turn it so that it'll line up with your spindle here. Also pay attention to the orientation of these bolts. They go in like this, not like this, and they have these little grooves you have to line up inside the spindle here. And remember, all this stuff wiggles and moves, and even this control arm here is spring loaded due to the bushings and whatnot, so you can go up and down, left and right with a lot of this stuff so that you can get these lined up if you're having trouble getting them through the holes there. I don't know if this is going to be an issue for any of you guys, so I figured I'd mention it just in case. I found that the holes on these conies were a little tight. I got the top one started no problem, but the bottom one just did not want to go. So I found if I actually put my ratcheting wrench on it, wrong way, and ratcheted it in, that the threads on the bolt was actually engaging the metal or the paint on these holes on this coney, and so it pulled it through that way. It'll only go as far as those grooves, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the nut on the other side and use the nut to tighten it and pull it the rest of the way through, doing the best job that I can to get those grooves lined up. And you want to make sure when you reinstall this that you are centralized in this hole here like this, and not that you have it like this, see? So you got to have it in the correct orientation one way or the other so that it's centralized in the hole, because this one's off to this side. 05 to 07, your strut bolts here are 148 foot-pounds of torque. 08 to 14, it's 166 foot-pounds of torque. Your sway bar link here, and remember you might have to hold the end still while you torque it down, is 85 foot-pounds of torque regardless of year. Your top bolts here, 26 foot-pounds regardless of year. So after everything's torqued down, make sure you hook your brake line, brake hose back up, push your little ABS speed sensor wire back in there, double check everything. Don't forget to torque up here and down there, sway bar link. Throw your wheel back on and you're good to go. So now we'll get to the rear here. Probably gonna be a different day. I got rain rolling in here soon. I gotta finish the other side, so it'll be a few seconds for you guys, but I'll be getting the rear on another day here. Alright, so it's the next day. Weather's even worse, but I got a break in the rain, and I'm gonna get the rear up here and get the shocks done. So in the back here, you just have to pull away this carpet so you can get to the top mounting bolt for the shock on each side. And it's the same as the front. If the entire shaft spins on you while trying to remove the nut, you can just lock onto the top and use a regular box wrench to get the nut off. You remove the tire to give yourself a little more room. It may not be completely necessary, but it will be tight if you don't, because when you go to pull this out, it'll be hitting the inside of the wheel rim there, or very close to it. That is, of course, after you've raised the vehicle via the rear axle. Then you just simply take this 15mm bolt out, and then your shock. Well, I got that little rubber piece still holding it up in there, but that's it. And then for the new one, you just have to, once you get it bolted in up top, you compress it manually via your hands to get it to line up and get that bolt back in there, with this on the other side, of course. Like so. And by the way, if your sway bar gets in the way due to it being larger on the GT or aftermarket or what have you, you can simply unbolt the sway bar links here and just pivot the sway bar down or up and out of your way. So make sure the tab that for that bracket that nut goes into goes right there between those two locking notches, and you're golden. Torque spec for the top mounting bolt is 30 foot-pounds of torque, and on your bottom bolt there is 85 foot-pounds of torque. I still got to do the other side here, but that's it. That's how you install shocks and struts on an 05 to 2014 Mustang. If this video helped you out, make sure you leave it a like. If I can find these parts through any of my affiliate links, I'll go ahead and put a link in the description to that. Possibly tools as well. But I want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.